So I guess the question then becomes, what do we do to start to help people to understand that intersection and break down those barriers so that they can reach out and get the help that they need?
I think, first of all, as service providers, cross training would be a great ideal, you know. So, for us as service providers to understand where the intersections are between domestic violence and sexual violence, and where are the uniquenesses, and how can we be sure not to silo people
Mm-hmm.
into, if you experience this type of assault, you come here, and if
Yeah.
you experience this type, you come here, because people have enough to deal with. They don't need to screen themselves in or out.
Exactly. And they also need to not feel like I can only tell this part of my story
Yeah.
here and this part of my story here. And I'm going to feel embarrassed if I share the fullness of my experience. Because we know that what happens is that trauma becomes compounded,
Mhm.
right? And the more that we don't address those underlying issues, the bigger the trauma becomes, and also the greater the secrecy becomes. And with secrecy comes shame.
Mhm. And I think for people working in the sexual assault field, it's important for them to recognize that when the survivor and the offender are cohabitating, then there can be potentially a safety issue.
Hmm.
When they're not living together, we don't typically experience that as
Yeah.
much concern around safety. But we know when they are living together, there can be some really serious safety concerns. And in fact, sexual assault is one of indicator of elevated risk in domestic violence.
Yeah. One of the things that we know from domestic violence is that often um, individuals who are in domestic violence situations will make trade offs in order to get safety. And one of the trade offs that we hear women saying is that they made trade offs around their freedom of sexuality or their choice around their sexuality. And so, in their minds, they brought it upon themselves or they made an agreement without ever being able to identify that that was actually a sexual assault because they didn't consent. It wasn't what they wanted, but that they had to do it for this greater good of safety. And so, to me, you can't separate out the sexual assault from the experience of domestic violence or the safety piece because they're all wrapped right in together.
Yeah, in both cases, the survivor carries so much
Yeah,
shame and stigma. Um, and it's not theirs to carry, it doesn't belong to them.
yeah,
So that's certainly one of the big similarities between the two.
yeah, absolutely.